So it's been about a year since I came out. Came out to myself, and then very quickly came out to those who were around me, who were close friends and family. And since then, that led to me separating from my husband. We're in the middle of divorce. Side note, divorces suck. Even if you know it's the right thing to do, even if you are both on the same page, separating from somebody, especially after being with them for 15 years, it's a mind fuck sometimes. I'm not gonna lie. That's a whole nother conversation and video, but just gotta put that out there. But back to being coming out. So it's been about a year, right? And I don't know about anybody else who's come out later in life. So again, I was 40 when I came out. I'm 41 now. And, you know, I'm dating. I very much am much more comfortable in myself and my sexuality and even in my body now that I realize that what my attraction was actually was to other women, just women in general. I hate to narrow it, just women in general. Attraction to women was something that was sexual as well as mental and, you know, physical, all that stuff, right? Once I sat in that, I thought that was the big thing, right? I thought that, okay, it came out and now you realize that you can be with a woman and all that stuff, right? That was it. Y'all, that's just the tip of the iceberg, I'm realizing, because as I've been sitting in this shit, right? Sitting in my own authenticity, actually allowing myself to speak truths to myself and realize that desires and wants are not a negative thing, right? Other things are starting to emerge. I'm really seeing how much everything about what I did was for the heteronormative gaze, how I dressed, what I interacted with, and then even thinking that I was straight. And that's what fucking blew my mind, is a couple of weeks ago, I was driving in the car and it just hit me. I don't know how you get those like things just hit you in the head. And it was like, bitch, you were never straight. And I literally was like, bitch, you were never straight. You are never straight. But I lived a straight ass life for years, y'all. When I mean a straight ass life, I mean the marriage, the kid, the house. We're working in middle America, right? Small town, doing fucking potlucks with other families that had themed dinners. Nothing wrong with that, but that really wasn't me. But that was what I was conditioned and thought I was supposed to be, right? So I don't know, this whole coming out later in life, just coming out in general, but coming out for me later in life has been this kind of unveiling and revealing of all these layers of how these systems, societal systems, really do sit within us. And we don't realize how it does in such both innocuous, but also, I don't know, like grand ways. So I don't know, if you came out later in life, how has it been for you?
Did you know that Atlanta's government is trying to tear down one of the largest urban forests in America in order to build a fake neighborhood for the Atlanta Police Department to practice raids? We are Transition US, and we're reporting today on Cop City, Atlanta. Yes, that's right. It would be a mock village, except nobody would actually live in the housing. Instead, police would practice raids on empty buildings while thousands of people live on the streets in the city. According to an article from The New Yorker, the Atlanta Police Foundation would pay 2/3 of the roughly $90 million in costs, while taxpayer money would pay for the remaining third. And just in case you're wondering, the Atlanta Police Foundation remains incredibly well-funded thanks to large corporate, individual, and NGO donors. Yet the true cost of Cop City would actually be far greater, as it would be built on land that is critical to prevent flooding. This area gets a lot of rain, and CNN Weather estimated that a Georgia storm during last September was a 1 in 1,000 year event. But as we all know, there will be dangerous storms again well before that. And as with pretty much any climate issue, it will not affect everyone equally. Research out of the University of Texas, San Antonio has found that members of historically oppressed populations, such as low-income and/or African and Latine diasporic communities, were 14 to 42% more likely to live in areas in which flooding was a greater risk throughout the Charlotte-Atlanta megaregion. Cop City was proposed in the wake of the 2020 Black Lives Matter protest movement. Atlanta in particular saw weeks of large-scale protesting as APD killed local 27-year-old Rayshard Brooks mere weeks after George Floyd's murder sparked anger across the world. But of course, the history of racialized violence in this area reaches much farther back than 2020. After this land was stolen from the Muskogee peoples, it once housed a slave plantation, as well as a segregation-era prison labor facility. The project is widely unpopular around town. Capital B, a nonprofit news network focused on Black voices, reports that 70% of the 1,100 plus people who commented on the measure to the city council opposed it. Activists have been living in the forest for years, doing their best to slow construction. To learn more, visit defendtheatlantaforest.org and savetheoldatlantaPrisonFarm.org. Also, like and follow us at Transition US to learn more about efforts to regenerate communities across America.
So Yale just hosted Kimberly Crenshaw, the professor who coined the term intersectionality, as well as other renowned professors to discuss the AP African American Studies ban in Florida and the subsequent curriculum changes made by College Board. Here are 5 huge takeaways. Number 1, decenter DeSantis. A lot of justified outrage to these events focuses on Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. But treating this problem as a product of one man's actions ignores years of conservative organizing around these education attacks. Also, it might let off the hook powerful education leaders like university presidents who have failed to take a stand. 2, media coverage has been irresponsible. News headlines, even from reputable sources, have been really downplaying the seriousness of this issue. For example, Professor Crenshaw read off a New York Times headline that says, "DeSantis takes on the education establishment and builds his brand." She then suggested headlines that would be much more appropriate, like, "Black Studies is the next venue in the war against academic freedom." 3, College Board's defense is weak. So College Board claims that the curriculum changes were not due to political pressure because they happened before the Florida ban. But many have pointed out that the same talking points that Ron DeSantis used were echoed by conservatives and conservative newspapers going way back into 2022. But regardless of what prompted these changes, College Board is not absolved from the damaging impact of them. Many works from Black thinkers that were taken out of the curriculum have been so impactful in shaping world events that to just call them secondary sources within African American studies would be ahistorical. On top of this, it would be a huge double standard to force students to learn the works of white theorists in classes like AP US history, but forbid them from learning the works of Black theorists in AP African American studies. One professor said that if we have to learn James Madison's ideas on democracy, then it's equally important to learn Angela Davis's ideas on abolitionist democracy. 4, this AP ban is just the beginning. Fascist governments all over the world often start their agenda by censoring counter-narratives. And it's clear that the narrative that they want to push is one that ignores racial injustice by pretending that the horrors of American history have no impact on today. In the words of Professor Stanley, they are trying to make inexplicable Black movements for social justice. They're trying to make it so that when you see a protest, you're like, what are they complaining about? We have MLK Day. And Professor Ferguson said that this attack is just starting with race, but it's really an attack on all critical pedagogy, all critical thinking, and all critical literacy, and it should alarm everyone. And 5, we need to mobilize. This issue is not going away soon, and we all need to act to confront it, especially to protect public schools for both teachers and students. There's going to be a webinar about what's going on and what needs to happen, and the link will be in my caption. I'll end with a profound quote from Professor Crenshaw that I want everyone to remember. "The world around us is not just the way things are, it's the way things have been made to be. And yes, we can do something about it." Did you attend the event or watch the live stream? If so, I know you probably have notes. Please leave anything I missed in the comments and follow for more.
Check out this video.
If you don't tithe, you can't eat here. I didn't say I won't feed you. I said you won't be able to receive anything that was fed. If you don't tithe, you can sit in a word and you will hear the message, but it won't transform your life. And it has nothing to do with me.
That is Pastor Stephen Chandler of Union Church in Maryland, and he speaks both in person and virtually to tens of thousands of people. And this is just the latest in theologies being used to spiritually manipulate people into giving more money to the church. I want to be clear, this is not about intention. I'm not saying this is being done intentionally. I don't know this man. But even if this is the kind of theology he actually subscribes to, even if he really believes it, that doesn't make it any less manipulative, because it's layered with misinformation and opinions about what these things are being passed off as word of God.
Hopefully, you come to Union Church to hear God's word, not my opinion, but God's word to be fed spiritually.
Tithing as taught in the evangelical church is a transplanted Judean tradition, and as I've said here before, it was never meant for Christians. This is what I mean when I say tithing is not a Christian practice and it wasn't about money. The tithe was given by the law of Moses, and it was a tenth of the produce of the land given to support the Levites for their work in the temple. It included grain, fruits, and animals from the herd and flock. We even see Jesus talk about this in Matthew 23:23 when he condemns the Pharisees, which are Jewish leaders, for not tithing. He said, "You give a tenth of your spices, mint, dill, and cumin, but you have neglected the more important matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness." Notice how he refers there to crops and not money, and notice that he's talking to Jewish leaders. But this information doesn't get shared from the pulpit. Instead, he uses the very scripture the church has long used to guilt and shame people into giving.
Can I read that? Oh my God, did God really say that verse? You ready? Malachi 3:8. He said, will a man rob God? He said, yet you've robbed me. But you say, in what way have we robbed you? He said, here's how. In the tithes and in the offering.
This is the scripture that leads to people all over the country, across generations, being victims of spiritual manipulation and financial abuse. But in the words of Conscious Lee, education is elevation.
Hopefully you heard the sadness in my voice, because I feel like that's the sentiment that God wrote it with. Are you really going to rob me? Do you not see all that I have for you? I'm getting ready to open the windows and you're going to begrudge me 10%. Really? I've got so much more for you.
This is spiritual manipulation. If the end goal is to get people to tithe, how do you do that? Using the big three: guilt, shame, and fear. In this example, scripture is being used to depict God as being heartbroken that people, some of whom are living paycheck to paycheck, aren't giving the church more money. Also, warnings and woes are shared that make people fear missing out on the blessings and favor of God.
Why would I tithe? Because if you don't, you will be a fruitless Christian. Here's what a fruitless Christian is. It's somebody who's going to heaven, but you can't tell. I love God and I'm going to heaven, but I've got no peace and I'm tormented. I'm overwhelmed by stress, and I love God and I'm going to heaven, but my life is not progressing at all. I'm marching around the same situation year after year after year after. I love God and I'm going to heaven, but the enemy, as the old folks used to say, is running roughshod all through my life, taking whatever I belong to God, you just can't tell.
Theological ideas are also used to get people to give more, like this claim that tithing is used to activate your faith so that God is allowed to give you things.
He's trying to activate your faith, because God said there's so much that I've got to get to you, but I'm not allowed to give it to you without your faith receiving it.
Or this claim that the storehouse is referenced in Malachi 3 is referring to the church, which I've addressed.
Because in order for it to be a tithe, he said it needs to be all of it to, what's the storehouse? To the place where you're being fed.
Contrary to popular belief, the storehouse is not the church. It was basically a treasury for the temple where they housed produce and livestock that people would tithe. Whenever I talk about tithing, people often say tithing doesn't always mean money. You can tithe time. Or some will say you can tithe to those in need, which I see as people trying to make this particular practice of giving work for them. But different opinions were expressed in this message.
I tithe, I just don't tithe to the church. I give 5% to my church. I give 5% to missionaries. I give 2% to this old lady. I actually give more than 10%. Yeah, you do, but you're not tithing. And the only reason I think I can divide my tithe is when I really think that it belongs to me. The Bible never says give your tithes. It always says bring them. Why? Because you can't give something that don't belong to you.
And what gets me about all this is that it's not like the pastor doesn't understand that people have bills.
By the way, stop sowing your bread. Stop giving away things that God is giving you to live off of. What does that mean? It means don't give your rent money away. Pastor, the Lord told me to give my rent in a limitless offering. No. He didn't. Now you homeless in faith. No. Pay your bills.
But I wonder if he knows what it's like to have to decide between paying bills or paying rent and paying tithes. This is not a video about discouraging giving. I am a giver and I believe in generosity, even sacrifice where appropriate. It is about holding the church to account for toxic practices around giving that harm the most oppressed in that congregation. Because this is a lot of their realities right now. Follow me here. Several years ago, U.S. Representative Katie Porter had a viral exchange with the Chase CEO about budgeting for his underpaid employees. She broke down a $35,000 a year budget for a mom of one child. And with bare minimum life expenditures like groceries, rent, utilities, childcare, etc., she was in the red $571.
My question for you, Mr. Diamond, is how should she manage this budget shortfall while she's working full-time at your bank?
I don't know. I'd have to think about that.
She didn't even include other important things like medical expenses, clothing, school lunch, etc. And she also didn't include the expense that so many families around the country feel spiritually obligated to pay, which is tithes and offerings. Imagine what that budget would look like if you included the minimum 10%, sometimes before taxes, that churches can demand from its members. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments, and as always, like and follow for more content.
Chloe Cooley is the sole reason that enslavement was abolished in Canada, and it only came because she publicly embarrassed them into doing so.
Ow!
In 1793, white enslavers in Canada started to get a little bit worried that the government was going to force them to free folks who were enslaved under their custody. And they didn't want to do this. They saw these people as their property.
My gag reflex went off.
And so many decided to sell these stolen African folks to places where slavery was still active and welcome and accepted. This is the case of what happened with Chloe Cooley, and she did not want to go. She was being sold to a man she'd never met, she did not know, and she thought that if she stayed in Canada long enough, then she might be granted freedom. She would rather stay with the evil that she knew than go and travel with the evil she didn't. Now, Chloe publicly fought back against her enslaver, Adam Vrooman.
I don't get ugly people that are mean.
So him and two of his employees, so three of them total, they publicly beat her up, they tied her up, and they gagged her mouth to try to get her to be quiet. And the entire time they took her in the boat across the Niagara River, she was screaming for help. Nobody stepped in, nobody intervened, everybody watched it and faked like they were appalled.
Trash.
So two folks saw this and they went to the Executive Council of Canada and they're like, you need to do something about this because this is not okay. At this point, the Executive Council of Canada, or the Canadian government, they were very embarrassed because this was messing with the image that they were trying to put out there that they were better than Americans.
Hey, can you come up with something else? Can you come up with something else?
And so they passed the only legislation that has ever been brought forth, which was meant to curb enslavement, but in reality, all they did was allow it to continue for years to come. They passed the law in 1793, and yet the latest recorded slave sale happened in 1824, but it's very likely that it happened way later and it just wasn't recorded because at this point it was illegal. If you want to learn more about Chloe Cooley and the just whole process of how Canada actually came to quote unquote abolish slavery, then make sure to tune into the newest podcast episode of Girl You Haven't Heard. If you're looking to watch on YouTube, then you can just search my name, Jada Hope, or the podcast name Girl You Haven't Heard, and it'll come right up. And if you can, it's Black History Month, so give me a little bit extra support and head over to the link in my bio to become a patron. You'll get early access to all of the episodes that are coming out this month and other benefits that other people don't get.
Yeah, man, everything's racist. Think about it. Your streets are named after prominent racists in your city, state, or throughout history. Washington, Jackson, Jefferson, Lee. All slaveholders, all racists. Your schools, elementary, middle, and high school, are named after prominent members of your community who are probably racists. Take mine, for example. My middle school was named after Forrest Comer White, a white supremacist who tried to commit murder-suicide by airplane, and our school mascot was a Confederate rebel. Even your institutions of higher learning have their roots in racism. Harvard, Yale, and Brigham Young University is named after racist Brigham Young, who tried to eradicate Native Americans by poisoning them. Traffic, racism. Instead of building highways in the most efficient ways, they ran them specifically through black and brown neighborhoods, and now we have traffic because of that. Seasonal allergies, racism. It's the beautification of the white parts of town with only male trees that continuously pop off pollen with no female trees to absorb them. That's why you have seasonal allergies. Racism. Tipping, racism. White store owners didn't want to pay black employees anything, so they said, if your service is good, leave it up to the customer to pay you, and that's how we got tipping. Student loans, racism. College used to be free, that is until black people started going to college, and then now you have to pay, and if you can't pay, you take out a student loan. The prohibition on cannabis, racism. You see, it used to be legal. That is until white people wanted to demonize Mexicans, so they renamed cannabis marijuana, spelled with an H, to sound like Tijuana, so they could justify the mistreatment of Mexican people. That Ford truck you drive? Racism. Henry Ford was so racist that Hitler had a picture of him at his desk. He was inspired by the efficiency of his assembly line and used that efficiency to efficiently kill more people. He also got the inspiration for his gas chambers from America's gassing and delousing of Mexican migrants at the border. Argentina is 96% white because of racism. Mexico is known as a mestizo country because of racism. And brown people all around the world are bleaching their skin because of racism's twin sister, colorism. Cancer rates in the South? Racism. You see, they like to build petrochemical plants near black and brown neighborhoods, thus giving us higher rates of cancer than those around us. Matter of fact, right here in Louisiana, Mossville, Louisiana, used to be a thriving black town founded by black people, but it was later bought out by a petrochemical plant and bulldozed. Racism. It affects every part of our daily lives, and until we acknowledge that, we can't change it, because we can't change what we refuse to acknowledge. And that's why racism continues to thrive in this country, because we've raised generations of people to be willfully ignorant of it.
Get unready and unlearn with me. Racism is a system, just like all the other isms. Capitalism, sexism. And these systems are designed to control, whether it is through sex or gender, sexism, whether it's through capital or money, capitalism, or race, racism. Racism is founded on the ideal that the lighter your skin is, the more the system benefits you, i.e., white supremacy. This system was created in like the 1600s or 1700s to uphold some sort of financial gain, power, always the same shit. When I was growing up, society told me that racism was skinheads and hillbillies, when really racism is not a person, it's a system, and it's much more insidious than that. If you're a racist, you believe in the system of white supremacy and upholding that. It's not just calling someone the N-word. That's a symptom of it. That's an action. That's prejudice. That's hate. But racism is the belief that this system, this country is built systemically on the supremacy of lighter skin. Period. You see it in the food system. You see it in the banking system. You see it in the housing. You see it in the government. You see it in the media. It's everywhere, honey. This is the system we're living in. And racism is a system that has been designed to withstand outrage. It can withstand backlash, which is an extremely exhausting realization. When we are giving backlash to racist people, it's fine and that's valid. Express yourself, but let's remember that they are able to do this because of a highly functioning, well-oiled machine that is racism in this country. I cannot wait to live in a society that is free of oppressive systems of control that's fueled by hate. But until then, I will keep educating the newer generation of people who have to unlearn what I unlearned. And I will not grow tired of that.
This is Black History Month, right? Well, we're going to celebrate Black Death History too. You see this guy here? See this guy? His name is Andrew Foster. He himself was deaf. Andrew Foster was born in 1925 in Inslee, Alabama. At the age of 11, he became sick with spinal meningitis. Because of this, he became deaf. He became the first Black African American student to receive a bachelor and a master's degree at Gallaudet University. Andrew Foster was also known as the father of the deaf because of his work. He founded a school for the deaf in Africa and went on to open up 31 more schools for the deaf. In the 1900s, education for Black deaf was very limited. He went to Alabama School for the Colored Deaf in Talladega, Alabama, and then moved to Flint, Michigan. There he received his high school diploma at the age of 26. After graduating, he went on to apply at Gallaudet University, but they rejected him because of race. We all know what that means. But Andrew Foster said, y'all not gonna reject me. I'm gonna keep going and I'm gonna continue applying, and applying. Gallaudet University eventually accepted him as a student. As I stated earlier, he went on to get his bachelor and master's degree at Gallaudet, and he became the first Black deaf to receive a bachelor and a master's degree at Gallaudet University. Andrew Foster was like, I gotta keep going. I gotta keep going. He traveled around the world. He did missionary work. He did many things for the deaf, and his legacy continued on because of his wonderful work. But anyway, he was married to a deaf woman, and they went on to have 5 children. He was on his way to Kenya in Africa, but unfortunately, he passed away in a plane crash. After his death, his legacy continued on all over the world, all over Africa, all over Gallaudet University. And this really encouraged a lot of Black deaf African Americans to continue on. This also let them know that no matter what your skin color, do not allow your skin color stop you from doing whatever it is that you need to do. Love y'all.
You so black. You so black. When you smile, the stars come out. You so black. When you born, the God come out. Black is not. Black when it's wrong and black when it's right. Black is pyramids and mathematics. Black is melanized and magic. Black is televised and in need of drastic black advancement. Black enhances, black with chances, black with privilege, black with pride, black on purpose on the black hand side, black and beautiful, black and blessed and highly favored, praise the Lord, black and blessed, black and so much more, black and nothing less, black and educated, black is brilliant. Black is strong, black is resilient, black is song, black is infinite, like hip hop or space. Black is grace, black is love, black makes babies, black babies grow up, black is tough, black is hard to do. Black is me, black is you. Black is not something we get to choose, but it is something we get to cherish. It's something we get to wear, and we get to rock this with honor. I'm black like my granddaddy and my great-great-great-great-grandma. Black is that lift every voice and sing. Black is that letting your freedom ring and resound. Black is adjective, adverb, color, and noun. You so black. Oh, you so black. When you smile, the stars come out. Baby, you so black. When you're born, the God come out.
Well, it's official. Did you hear? Georgia just ratified the 13th Amendment. What? You mean, yep. Slavery is now officially and constitutionally banned in the United States. Wow, I never thought I'd see today. How are we gonna build back up the southern states if we don't have slave labor to help us do it? Well, we could just build it back up ourselves. Are you implying that we as powerful southern white men do work for ourselves? What the hell is wrong with you? Well, it doesn't sound like we have much of a choice. We have to pay black people. I mean, it's a ton of them. They all need jobs and we can't legally enslave them anymore. Hey, wait a minute. Have you actually read the language of this 13th Amendment? It basically says what you just said. Slavery and indentured servitude is now illegal. It says slavery is still allowed if it's to be used as punishment for a crime. This is how we do it. We build back up the South by forcing black criminals into forced labor. Yeah, but first you would have to turn all the black people into criminals. I mean, how do you force someone into being a criminal? Oh, Terry, we work for the state legislature. We simply have to criminalize their very existence. Hey, black people, what's up? Hey, what's up, man? Yeah, you're all under arrest. Under arrest? For what? Loitering? Loitering? What the hell is loitering? Loiter, to loiter. It means standing around in public doing nothing. Wait a minute. Standing around in public doing nothing is a crime now? Yep, we just made it a felony. So you're going to jail for like 7, 8 years. And you, on the corner there, where do you live? Me? I don't really live anywhere. So you're homeless. I'm a former slave. It's only been a few years. I haven't been able to acquire a house yet. Ah, you're a vagrant. Vagrancy is also a felony now. So you're gonna go to jail for like 8, 9 years. But hey, look on the bright side. You won't be homeless anymore. Motherfucker! Man, can you believe this shit? We got arrested for literally doing nothing. Hey, don't worry about it, young blood. It's only a few years. At least we have a roof above our head now. Hey, where's the roof? Why are we outside? Shut up, inmates. You work for us now, okay? The Tennessee Company. We make steel. You damn right you make steel. You stole us. We ain't supposed to be working for you. We supposed to be going to jail. Well, this is your jail. You've been leased. Leased. Yeah, the state of Alabama leased you guys to us. We paid them for your forced labor. If you're paying the state of Alabama for our labor, how come you just couldn't pay us directly for the labor? Oh no, that would involve us giving money to black people. That's a big no-no. Plus, we'd all have to pay you as individuals, fair wages. Nah, this is much easier.
Foraging as a black person is an act of rebellion.
I saw this TikTok of yours where you explain why you go by the name Black Forager.
Black Forager is what I go by everywhere other than TikTok, and I often get the question, why? Why do you need to bring race into it? When I was going about making my page, I didn't see a lot of people who looked like me in like the modern day foraging space. To this day, here in the United States, it's still like a very predominantly white hobby. It's also really important to me just because there's a very storied history here in the United States with black people, indigenous people, poor people, and their access to land and their access to food. A lot of slaves learned from a lot of indigenous peoples how to forage to fill out the little bit of food that they were given. And this was a skill set that suddenly they couldn't use anymore. But when slaves were freed, laws were immediately put in place to curb black foraging, to financially bind us to the plantations we had just escaped. No trespassing laws start popping up. For a long period of time, people who look like me have gathered food, picked food, processed food, not for our own benefit. It has been for the benefits of whoever we were working for. So to me, to do this act and have often no one but myself benefiting from it, it really just feels like giving a middle finger to this system that was inherently created to put us at a disadvantage. For years, we were kept out of the wild food narratives. Wild food was taken out of our hands deliberately, and we still found our way back to it. And to me, that, I'm not gonna cry on this video. The fact that a lot of other people of color have told me that I'm the reason why they feel comfortable enough now going into these spaces, knowing that they can identify things, knowing that they have this little bit of like self-sufficiency that they can be proud of. Nothing gets the waterworks going faster.
So I was tagged in this video quite a few times. For those who don't know what's happening, this student is asking their professor to speak a little bit louder because there's some deaf students in the class. And this is a perfect and prime example of several things that I'm going to go over here. The first is that this is a perfect example of equality versus equity. A lot of you like to practice toxic equality towards disabled people, which is I'm not going to give you any special treatment or any special things because everybody's going to be treated equal here. Disabled people need equity, not equality. Treating us the same doesn't work because we do not need the same things in order to be included in certain spaces. It's like if you and a group of friends are walking down the road and you notice that one of your friends only has one shoe on. Don't look at that person and say, oh, I noticed you have one shoe on, but I'm not going to treat you like anybody else. You could walk down this road with us. If you can't do it, oh well. Just give the person another shoe. Another thing is that because people approach disabled people with toxic equality, they view disabled people asking for accommodations and inclusion as asking for special treatment. And because they think disabled people are asking for special treatment, they treat disabled people with downright hostility when that professor, by law, is required to provide accommodations to students in that class. You know, the law he's supposed to know as a law professor. Another thing is that, especially in academic spaces, a lot of you do not think that disabled people deserve to share space with you. Because if you earned it, they couldn't have possibly earned it with their weaknesses, right? If they really did get there with all their weaknesses, they'd have the good sense to not complain or ask for extras, right? And if they are there and the good kind of disabled person, then they must have overcome their disability. Which leads me to my last point. Somebody overcoming their disability is a crock of shit. It's a myth. It's bullshit. Often when disabled people are in what non-disabled people view as merit-based spaces, non-disabled people have this idea that disabled people had to overcome their disability to get there, which is bullshit. A disabled person in the room with you is still a disabled person in the room with you. But in reality, all they're saying is that as a non-disabled person, it's a lot easier for them because that disabled person got there through merit to ignore that person's disability and the needs associated with that disability. But all in all, none of this is new. This is how you treat disabled people all the time.
Like you ever have a chance. Whatever. Oh my god. Oh, gorgeous. Oh my god, let's hang out.
Tag, you're in. I don't want to play anymore.
I'm so sorry. 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 I'm so sorry.
Yeah, watch where you're going, dweeb.
I'm so sorry.
You guys want to hear a scary story? You guys want to hear a scary story?
Yeah, dude, tell us.
Sure.
What is it? I mean, like, he's so annoying, such a jerk. I mean, I don't know why anyone deals with him at this point. Like, it's just absolutely ridiculous. He's right behind me, isn't he? Mm-hmm.
You found a date to the dance. What's his name?
Pinecone Oreo Rose.
Oh, really? What school does he go to?
He doesn't go here. He goes to Riverside. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
We'll see him at the dance.
You will? You will?
I hate this town. I'm gonna get out of here. You'll all see. She thinks she's better than me. She'll never fit in.
Ooh.
Well, congratulations. You got what you wanted. I hope you're happy. Kristen, I don't know about this.
It's just a stupid haunted house. That's so not funny. Guys, stop! John, you're better than this. Look at me! Look at me, John!
I just realized something really sad about the Tyree Nichols situation and the cops that were involved in his murder. This is literally a situation of the overseer and the drivers. For those of you who don't know, there's a lot of intergenerational trauma in the African American community that stems from slavery and systemic racism. I'm gonna use the episode of Harriet Tubman Animated Hero Classics as an example here. In most slave plantations, you have your hierarchies. You know, the light-skinned slaves usually do domestic work, the darker-skinned ones do the field work. But you also had the slave plantation owners, the overseers, who are usually relatives of the plantation owner, or just a bunch of rough men that he hired to oversee the slaves, but also the drivers, or the black overseers. The driver, or the black overseer, was usually a slave who had gotten in good graces with the master of the plantation and had been promoted to that position. His job was to basically do any and all things the master and the overseers told him to do in regards to disciplining his fellow slave. Whipping, beating, killing, capturing. In this scene right here, Harriet Tubman didn't say hello to the overseer and gave him the silent treatment. So the overseer got the driver to knock over the pile of wood that Harriet had been tasked with stacking up. Now, if you watch the full episode, you'll see that this driver isn't as bad as he looks because he, in the end, helps Harriet escape. But not all black drivers were nice. Many of them were afraid of losing their good graces with their master and being pushed back down, demoted to being a field slave. This is one of many psychological tactics used by slave owners to keep their slaves in check. Because if one slave does something wrong, It affects the other slaves on the plantation, and it can also affect the driver negatively. So it was a way to kind of encourage the slaves to work together to be good slaves and properly follow master's orders. And it's really sad because when I think of the black driver, I also think of the black cop. And what many of y'all don't realize is that black drivers, black overseers were also used so that way the masters and the overseers didn't have to really get their hands dirty or be accused of like too much abuse of their slaves. Notice how the 5 black cops were charged immediately, and yet the white one was suspended first and then fired, and I don't think he's been charged yet, actually. Even though if you watch the body cam videos, he was the one saying, I hope they stomp on his ass. He may not have been as directly involved in the situation, but he was compliant and he was instigating it. Those cops beat up Tyree Nichols in the same way many black fathers beat up their sons and call it discipline. But those black fathers do that to their sons because when those fathers were young, they were attacked by gangs of white men or groups of white cops during the civil rights movement. In the same way, the black overseer, the driver, would whip and beat up his fellow slaves to avoid the same fate happening to him from the white overseer and plantation owner. The black community ostracizes black people they perceive as whitewashed because they subconsciously perceive them as people who would have been drivers or black overseers back during the slave days. And if not overseers, just snitches in general.
Did you know the Yin Yang twins are not twins? Or brothers? Or related at all for that matter? Did you know that they both bonded over the physical disabilities they both have? I bet you didn't. Hi, I'm Fatu. I love the early 2000s. So for Black History Month, I'm doing a series called Fa 2000s where I talk about my favorite black artists, groups, and moments from the early 2000s. And today we're going to be talking about the iconic Yin Yang twins. So let's get into it.
I got you.
So the 2 members of the Yin Yang twins are Kane and D-Rock, and D-Rock's real name is D'Angelo, and Kane's real name is Eric. They're both from Atlanta, and they're both making music at this time. So D-Rock and Kane meet each other, and they bond over their love of making music and writing music, and also bond over their disabilities. If you did not know, D-Rock was born with an underdeveloped hand, and Kane was born with cerebral palsy that gave him a limp when he walked. And they bonded over the disabilities they both had and how it affected them, and they put that into their music. So they're making music together and they're talking about like a lot of deep topics. So then they end up meeting Mr. Collie Park, who's a huge record producer in Atlanta and also has his own label. And he tells them, okay, deep topics are great, but we got to start talking about some ass shaking. Talk about some ass shaking over some good beats. And so they did. And they dropped their first album, Thug Walkin', which brings out their first big single, Whistle While You Twerk, which I feel like blasts the word twerk into the American lexicon. Again, white people didn't discover that word till like 15 years later, but the black people been new. And then in 2002, they dropped their second album, and that album has Say I, which, ooh, when that song will play at the parties. And then they also had the song Twerky Later. But then I feel like things really started to shift for them in 2003. 2003 is a huge year for the Yin Yang twins. They are featured on a Britney Spears song, I Got That Boom Boom, on her album In the Zone. Love that album and that song. And they dropped their third album, Me and My Brother. And on Me and My Brother, they have the iconic Salt Shaker. There is no ass shaking song like Salt Shaker. And of course, Naggin' and What's Happening with Trick Daddy. And then they were featured on a little song, don't know if you've ever heard of it, with Lil Jon called Get Low. Salt Shaker made it to the top 10 of the Billboard Hot 100 and Get Low was number 2. And I'm sorry, but there will never be a song like Get Low. When I hear the beginning of Get Low, when I hear the chorus from the window to the wall to the sweat drop down my what? No. And they keep it going. Yin Yang twins are churning out hit after hit after hit after hit after hit. And then in 2005, they dropped their 5th album called USA, United States of Atlanta. And at this time, this was the height of Atlanta music. We're talking about the Yin Yang twins, Sierra, Usher, Lil Jon, East Side Boys like Ludacris, all of these people. Then the Yin Yang twins get a little sexy on us. They dropped the song Wait, the Whisper song, which... chef's kiss. They also dropped Bad with Mike Jones, I Need a Dime. That's top of the line, cute face, slim waist with a big behind. That one. And they also dropped a song called Bad with a young man named Pitbull. And then of course in 2006, we can't forget their feature on Miss New Booty. But then, of course, times changed, music changed, and crunk music kind of fell out of popularity. But I just want to say there will never be a group like the Yin Yang twins. The Yin Yang twins put their stamp on black music history. And I just want to say history in general because they were just making pure fun music. The music was only for enjoyment. We were talking club music, house party music, barbecue music, ass shaking music, strip club music. The music was just fun. I miss that era, and I wish the Yin Yang twins the best. And I'm honestly probably sure they're at one of these like lovers and friends type festivals. So if you're there, I hope you catch them. But anyway, that's it. Like and follow for more of these kinds of videos. Thank you.
doing enough. And when I asked her what has been changing for her, she said it's student.
So I'm going to say this with a lot of respect and love, and I really do mean that as an educator. It is not student apathy, y'all. And I think y'all know that as teachers, especially K through 12. But you're also really burnt the fuck out, and you've been burnt down for a long time. And what happens in institutional structures, right, that have been underfunded and have been consistently underfunded by the state since the 1980s? Let's have a real conversation about what's going on in the U.S. right now with our institutions, particularly education. Our institutions have been crumbling for a very long time. They've been crumbling especially since Reagan and Reaganomics, with that whole trickle-down economics bullshit that didn't work. When you have a state that consistently tells its citizens what it actually cares about and what it needs us to do, and then those citizens actually start to believe what the state is saying, I would argue what you get then is student apathy. Because, see, youth have not been conditioned as long in these systems as we have. So a lot of us, especially I would argue if you're a millennial, whether it be a young or old millennial, the older Gen Zs, we are really working through a process of deconditioning ourselves from these systems by actually believing this system because we're actually starting to believe ourselves. This whole idea of therapy and all this other shit actually is quite good generationally for us to do because it also helps us be able to embody our sense of self so that we can start to see structure and power for what it is. And it is a raggedy ass motherfucker who consistently gaslights all of us into pointing the finger at one another instead of all of us having all of our fingers come together so that we can have multiple truths, sit at the table at the same time, have a conversation so that they together can really reveal who the damn problem is. And it is not your students and it is not your teachers overall, it's the state. But the state has pitted student against teacher, teacher against student in these really fucked up ways. Now, of course, we have issues around class, race, and gender. I am not dismissing any of those, sexuality. I'm not dismissing, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about underlying fundamental structures of education. And I think we need to actually look at how students are reacting right now, especially the younger they are, because what they are showing us is what honestly a real reaction is to a state that told us that it will let us die as long as it can suck something out of us for its profit and benefit and good. So I would just offer this, and again, out of respect and love. What I am hearing is that y'all are burnt out. I am hearing certain students are burnt out, but a lot of times right now, students are having, quite frankly, a more appropriate response to this bullshit than many of us are. Let's also learn from them too.
All I'm saying is Moana had to leave the island to go restore the heart of Tafiti. That's all I'm saying. Her dad probably didn't want her to do that. Some of the townspeople didn't want her to do that, but she knew what she had to do. And ultimately, no matter how much she wanted to fit within the system, she had to go restore the heart of Tafiti. She wrestled with it though. Everyone has a place here. Everyone has a role and identity. Maybe I'll just fit into my identity and do what the town people need me to do. But what the town people needed her to do was be herself and go restore the heart of Tafiti and live into her purpose. The townspeople were mad. They didn't show this in the movie, but I just know that they were mad. They were upset. Who does she think she is? She thinks she's better than us. She's just gonna leave the island, leave us behind. But when Moana got to Tafiti and restored the heart, and all the fruit and vegetables and vegetation came back, they was eating them fruits even if they was mad. They were still eating the fruits of her labor and her journey and her commitment to honoring herself. No one really understood or saw how hard it was for her. Moana said, I'm a girl who loves my island and the girl who loves the sea. It calls me. So she's tied up in between these two identities, and ultimately she chooses herself and her purpose. And she goes to restore the heart of Tafiti. And everyone is better off for it. And no one knew how hard the journey was for her. That she almost gave up, that she threw the heart of Tafiti back in the water. It was like, I don't know how to do this. I can't. I'm tired. And who came back and guided her and helped her to get back on track and reminded her of who she was? Her ancestors. Her ancestors, her grandmother inspired her, came back and mentored her, encouraged her. And she was able to complete her work. You have to do what you got to do. You have to do your work for you. And ultimately, you'll come back and help everybody else. But do your work. Do the work set before you. Do the work that's on your heart. Do the thing that calls you, that pulls you, that compels you. Do that thing. That's all I'm saying. Love and light to you all, and as always, like and follow for more content.